Welcome everyone to another edition of the Vlog, Freelance Teacher Videocast. I don't know if you want to call it podcast. I don't have a proper podcast. I've got to get on that. But this one is called the three most important... No, that's actually not true. Three major conspiracy theories. Because I've been trying to do, for the past few months, been winnowing down the list, top 10 conspiracy theorists. Oftentimes the people behind the conspiracy theories are exceedingly interesting, to say the least. So the top 10 conspiracy theorists, this is kind of like a warm-up to that, because we have some interesting people in particularly contemporary American history. And it's also weird because the conspiracy thing is important in many, many ways. First of all, it's one of those things that people say, well, I don't deal with conspiracy theories, but they know all of them, right? So I've had this happen, all right? I was scoffed at by someone who doesn't read, believes everything the New York Times and the Daily News and CNN tells, right? This is just a herd member. This is a farm animal, a tax livestock. This person actually scoffed at the conspiracy thing idea and was always, someone would tell. There can't be conspiracies because someone would talk. Right? I mean, this is obviously the mind of a child. This is someone who's been brainwashed and is living in the Matrix, in a sense. So then scoffed that I would believe in things like chemtrails and that the moon landing was fake, and that what's the other one? I think it was something with the JFK assassination, something a little bit more intense and less well known than the grassy knoll, which everybody knows about. And it's funny because this person who scoffed at me and kind of thought I was kind of a twit for even just discussing conspiracy theories knew what to laugh at. Now, it might have been some New York Times article where they were scoffing at conspiracy theories. I don't know, but it's weird how you believe in the Bigfoot and that the people get together in a dark room and manage the world. So anyway, the weird part is that it's important in America because it's funny because you leave the country and people who know and read about conspiracy theories aren't seen as weird or crazy or bizarre. They're seen mostly as people who are at minimum, willing to think for themselves and aren't just herd members, tax cattle. Yes, CNN, it's on the cover of the New York Times. Global warming is going to kill us. Everybody needs free health care. Oh my God. OMG, you're terrible. The country is all racist. I mean, you have to be a drone. You have to be an unthinking person to buy and drink down what the corporate media tells you. So the people who don't, which isn't that bizarre, right? I mean, they don't believe all this nonsense, but they're called conspiracy theorists. That makes the conspiracy theory important. And the three that I want to talk to you about today, 2.5 really, because the third one, right? I'm going to hear about it. But the first two are conspiracy theories that are no longer theories, that are just facts. But if you had said anything about them, as recently as 5 years ago, but guaranteed 10 years ago, 2009, if you spoke, because I did, if you spoke heavily about and talked openly about the first two, you were seen as a complete nut. And now, it just is. It's just declassified information and nothing much to discuss, right? So the first one is the Gulf of Tonkin Incident in Vietnam. This is the thing that got the Vietnam War started. 1965, Vietnamese ships, Viet Cong ships, the communists who were taking over Vietnam fired on American military, and Lyndon Johnson had no choice, of course. I think it was 1965. It might have been summer of 64. And he said the Vietnamese have fired upon American military, and we need to escalate and go to war and stop the spread of communism because of the domino theory. Because everybody knows if Vietnam, a country that you can't find on a map that is smaller than many United States individual states, if they were to go communist, then what's to stop the rest of the world from becoming a communist government? Right? Tell them, Lyndon. So, the conspiracy theory was that the Gulf of Tonkin incident didn't happen. Not that it was altered, not that they messed up the cables in the way in the wire machine and the Morse code. No, the radar misread. No, the conspiracy theory was that it didn't happen, that it was made up out of nothing. And guess what? Starting with the earliest I saw something on this was a documentary called The Fog of War, which is very good, and I recommend it. And it mentioned that the radar never showed any of those kinds of things, that possibly it was a mistake. And it has since come out that the event just didn't happen. There was no Gulf of Tonkin incident. I wonder how the 58,000 dead Americans and their families feel about such a thing. My uncle was in Vietnam. A good friend of the family who has since died was in Vietnam, partially, we think, because of damage done back then. Maybe the millions of Vietnamese men, women, children, the My Lai incident, one of probably many atrocities committed, all because of an event that did not happen. And you were a conspiracy theorist if anytime before probably 2012, you know what, let me edit that. There are probably mouth-breathing, ignorant Americans who would call you names if you said that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was artificial, never happened. There are probably people who still get angry. Or they would somehow justify the unjustifiable. 58,000 people, Americans, dead. Countless Vietnamese for, in effect, nothing. So, that was a conspiracy theory that has now become conspiracy fact. The other one is, switch gears here, completely different idea, completely different thing. That's a very, the Vietnam thing, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, very physical, overt. Something very covert, hidden, is the MKULTRA mind control program. Meaning that the intelligence agencies, particularly the CIA, was working on programs, ways, both harsh and subtle, to mind control, to perform mind control on other people, to brainwash them, to control them through their mind, to do things, to think certain ways. There's a book called A Terrible Mistake. And that book was out and available about 10 years ago. That's about the first time you ever heard anything about it, because it's about a guy who wound up dying, and he was part of that experiment. But again, it's one of those things where the conspiracy theorist in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, if you mentioned MKUltra, you were a conspiracy theorist. You were a weirdo. You were just bizarre. You were someone who just deserved scorn. You can go online, even a converged nonsense site that's completely now useless, unfortunately, because it was a good idea. Wikipedia, you can go read declassified MKUltra directives, memos, mind control. Yes, your American government, land of the brave, home of the free, all this kind of stuff, right? Hey, look, my brother was a Marine, my nephew's a Marine as we speak. Right? I can wave the flag better than you can. I can play those cards better than you can. Hello, look. I can do the American flag waving bit better than most. I talk that language, and you don't. But, yes, your American government working on people as if they were cattle, as if they were guinea pigs, to try to control them so they could do covert things. So they could do as they're told. cynical side of me says they succeeded. MKUltra was a rousing success. Look around you. Everything is fake, yet people believe it's real. Michael Malice has a funny line in his dialogues where he talks about that documentary called The Matrix. Yeah, it kind of is, right? Everybody walking around in a fog of fakeness. And maybe MKUltra, maybe they're better than we thought. Maybe it wasn't decommissioned. But MKUltra is one of those things that has turned from a conspiracy theory, and it is now conspiracy fact. You'll see it in mainstream news, corporate news. Go to any corporate news site and do a word search for MKUltra, particularly what used to be called newspapers, and you'll see it talked about as if it were always part of American contemporary history. The last one, and this is where people weirdly enough get emotional, and I don't understand why, and Owen Benjamin has been talking about this one a lot, and I've spoken about it a little bit, but not much, because there's no real point. But the moon landing has come up because it's the 50th anniversary. 1969 in July, the Apollo astronauts, Apollo 11, they landed on the moon. It was on TV. Richard Nixon even picked up the phone and called the astronauts on the moon and spoke with them. And it was on the cover of all the newspapers. Richard Nixon called them up and they had a little chat. And it was just part of the deal while they were up on the moon in their dune buggy. Now, I never thought about the moon landing very much, even when I was a quote-unquote conspiracy theorist. And I don't really see it as being a conspiracy theorist. I view those years, for me, probably 2007 through 06, 07, somewhere through 2015, 2016, right? Hardcore, like I read everything I could get my hands on, all over the internet, books, you name it, PDFs, whatever. Sites that have been banned, YouTube channels that have vanished, videos that have been scrubbed. I was the guy that watched all that stuff. So now, I looked into the moon landing for a while there, and the moon landing, the way I used to say it was, the people who doubt that the moon landing happened had a case. That they had a case, that they actually made good points. And I intentionally said it that way because I don't need to get into an argument with a mouth-breathing herd animal, right? I'm not in the habit of going back and forth with someone who's read and looked at the issue not at all and simply believes what they're told because they were told by a teacher or by a book in a class that America went to the moon. It's pointless arguing with someone like that. So rather than, so that's why I would say the people, they have a case. And usually the American farm animal, the American cattle would kind of chuckle and then leave it at that. But here's the thing about the phone call. And I want you to think about this. On a rainy day when I drive to my job, I usually talk to my brother and I pass an antenna. I don't know what kind of antenna it is, but I lose reception on my cell phone. On a rainy day, heavy cloud cover. Call gets dropped. It's 2019. I'm on an iPhone, and so is he. Two and a half hours upstate. I live in the Bronx, and we drive sometimes about 2.5 hours, 2 hours upstate, and do vacation time up there in the country. It's wonderful. There's a bridge over a creek that you have to stand on if you want to have a phone conversation is not quite, the signal isn't quite strong enough. If you want to send text messages or see a short video or something like that, you have to stand on the bridge. And it's in an open field. We're not in the woods. It's wide open. You can see pictures of it on my Instagram account. Follow. And we lose, but if you're just outside the room in the lodgings, or you're up on the other side of the place, the other side of the farm, there's no reception. Can't do it. You've been told, and you believe, Richard Nixon on a landline phone in his office at his desk. Landline phone, it's the big scoop-looking thing with the twirly wire coming out of it. Ask your grandma. Is on the phone with astronauts. How? And you especially my legions of fans know how this works. Oh, they had special technology and amazing batteries, super powered blasting signal straight at the astronauts. Okay. What about the astronauts? You're told, and you believe it, that they, with a 12 volt battery, 12 volts, with that kind of power, sent a signal back to the Earth. It went through the Van Allen belts, through the atmosphere, and the Earth, which is a ball spinning in space at 1,000 miles an hour, that signal, because there's no cable, Earth, that signal reached Richard Nixon, reached back down through all of that, hit the receptor, and they were able to talk on the phone while Buzz Aldrin was goofing off on the dune buggy, on the dirt in the moon. Do you see where I'm going with this? You're supposed to just believe that. And maybe you do believe that people went to the moon. Okay, that's fine. But here's the crazy part. You're not even allowed to, and some of you are afraid to even question something like that phone call. And a few people are sort of taking, maybe like they put the red pill in the little clip thing, and they take a piece of the red pill. And they're like, okay, that couldn't have happened. But they just wouldn't lie about going to the moon. And the phone call thing was done as a theatrical effect. Okay, all right. Try to find somebody who's even willing to do that. I mean, more people seem to be willing to, but not Americans anyway. My wife, I mentioned it just off the cuff out of the blue as an experiment. She's like, that stuff's fake. And then walked away. She's an Ecuadorian peasant, right? Her BS-ometer has never been broken. When you grow up with nothing and you're a person of the earth, especially her, right, 4'11", she's really close to the earth, then you understand stuff. You understand when your chain is getting jerked, right? So you just dismissed it as BS, the whole thing, right? But try to find someone to say, yeah, that phone call thing, that's just not possible. The technology, they didn't have it. NASA admits that they lost or broke. They can't recreate the technology. That one astronaut says, there's this one astronaut guy that says, we had the technology, but we had to destroy it. It's too dangerous to bring it back. You could see Neil Armstrong being interviewed by a bunch of computer people. He's like, we didn't even have a screen. We had a computer we didn't have gigs. We didn't have megs. We had Ks, right? Kilobytes. And there was no screen. There was no mouse. There was barely a keypad with a code that you had to put in. That was it. And it was static memory in the kilobytes. And that kind of technology with a 12-volt battery, they made a phone call to the White House. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. I just don't believe it. And it's not that I don't believe it. That can't happen. That's not possible. So I call bullshit. Moon landing, that part of it, that phone call stuff is so bad. It's so terrible that I think you're kind of stupid if you believe it. So you might say, well, the other stuff is true, but that part is fake. All right, then why'd they fake the phone call? Are you admitting that the government duped you about the phone call? How deeply do you want to dig? And then you'll see people scatter. Like, when you turn on the light at night in your kitchen and the roaches scatter? You know what I'm talking about. Well, that's what people do. They mentally scatter, if not physically run away from you. If you allow them to get that close to, maybe they were duped by their God, the United States federal government. Right? Or NASA. NASA, NASA. Never a straight answer. Anyway, those are the top 3 conspiracies that I wanted to talk about, because the moon landing thing is the 50th anniversary. These other things have become fact. And there's a lot of other stuff out there. So look for the article, Thank you for listening. Try to find some conspiracies, right? Look, they're fun. And if nothing else, a lot more fun than the other stuff you've got. So an assignment that is optional, that I'm not going to grade, is go look up some of the conspiracies you've heard that you laugh at and see if they have a case, and use my wording. Do they have a case? Like the Bigfoot stuff, they don't have a case. There's no case. There's no case for Bigfoot. Nope. No case. A lot of things that are out there. That the alien thing, there's no case. They don't have a case. When you dig for the alien stuff, you're not going to find anything of substance. Alien thing is a total hoax. But prove me wrong. Think for yourself. Do your own thinking. They don't ever try to teach you how to think, do they? They teach you what to think. You come here, and I will help you with teaching you how to think. Talk to you next time. Have a good one. And enjoy your newfound conspiracy hunting.